The afternoon sun cast a golden glow over the busy streets of Dakar. Cars honked impatiently, street vendors called out to passing crowds, and people hurried toward their destinations. Among them was Aminata, a beautiful 26-year-old woman known for her elegance, confidence, and expensive taste. She dreamed of marrying a wealthy man who could give her the luxurious life she had always imagined. Every morning, before leaving for work, she stood in front of the mirror and reminded herself of one simple rule. I deserve the best, and I'll never settle for less. Her best friend often laughed and asked, "What if the right man isn't rich?" Aminata smiled confidently. "Then he isn't the right man." To her, love without money was simply another word for struggle. That same afternoon, after finishing work, she walked toward the roadside, hoping to find transportation home. A yellow taxi slowly stopped beside her. Behind the steering wheel sat Moussa, a calm and humble 30-year-old man with kind eyes and a warm smile. His clothes were simple, but spotless. Unlike most drivers, he greeted every passenger with genuine respect. "Good afternoon," he said politely. "Where would you like to go?" Aminata stepped into the taxi without even looking at him. During the ride, Moussa noticed how respectful and intelligent she seemed. Their conversation started with simple questions about the weather, then work, then life. For nearly 20 minutes, they talked comfortably. When they finally arrived, Aminata reached for her purse. Before she could leave, Moussa took a deep breath. "I know this may sound unexpected," he said with a nervous smile, "but I'd really like to get to know you better. Maybe we could have coffee sometime." For a brief second, Aminata simply stared at him. Then she looked at his taxi. His simple uniform. And finally at the small taxi meter beside the steering wheel. A slow smile appeared on her face. But it wasn't a kind one. "A taxi driver wants to date me?" The smile on Aminata's face quickly turned into laughter. "A taxi driver wants to date me," she repeated loud enough for people nearby to hear. A few pedestrians turned their heads. Moussa's smile faded, but he remained calm. "I'm sorry if I offended you," he said politely. "I just thought you seemed like a wonderful person." Aminata crossed her arms. "You don't even know me. That's why I wanted the chance." She shook her head with a sarcastic laugh. "You should be looking for someone who rides in taxis, not someone who dreams of owning luxury cars." Just then, two of her friends walked out of a nearby cafe. "Aminata," one of them called. "What are you doing?" She pointed toward Moussa and laughed. "This taxi driver actually asked me out." Her friends burst into laughter. One whispered loudly, "Maybe he'll take you on a romantic trip, with the taxi meter running." The three women laughed together. Moussa lowered his eyes for a moment but never raised his voice. "I didn't mean to embarrass you," he said quietly. "I simply believed character matters more than money." Aminata smiled coldly. "Character doesn't pay bills." She closed the taxi door and walked away with her friends, still laughing. Before disappearing around the corner, she turned back one last time. "My future husband will own companies, not drive people to work." Her words echoed in Moussa's mind. For several seconds, he remained sitting behind the wheel in silence. Then he smiled to himself. Not because her words didn't hurt, but because he had heard them before. Many times. That evening, after parking the taxi, Moussa drove to a quiet neighborhood where a small apartment building stood. As he walked inside, his elderly neighbor smiled. "Long day?" Moussa nodded. "But tomorrow will be better." At the same time, across town, Aminata returned to the apartment she shared with her quiet roommate, Fatou. Fatou noticed the smile on Aminata's face. "What happened today?" Aminata laughed again. "You won't believe it. A taxi driver asked me to go for coffee." Fatou looked surprised. "And?" I told him to stay in his own league. Fatou didn't laugh. Instead, she simply asked. Was he respectful? Aminata paused. Yes. Was he kind? Yes. Fatou smiled gently. Then maybe you judged him too quickly. Aminata rolled her eyes. Kindness doesn't buy the life I want. But neither of them knew. The man they had just been talking about was hiding a secret that would soon change all of their lives. The next morning, Moussa returned to work as if nothing had happened. He greeted every passenger with the same warm smile. Some thanked him. Some ignored him. And a few looked down on him simply because he drove a taxi. Yet he never complained. He believed one thing. Respect costs nothing, but it's worth everything. That afternoon, fate intervened. Fatou had just finished grocery shopping when heavy rain suddenly poured over the city. Within minutes, the streets were flooded. She searched for a taxi. The first two refused because of the traffic. Then a familiar yellow taxi stopped beside her. It was Moussa. He immediately recognized her. You're Aminata's roommate, aren't you? Fatou smiled. Yes. I am. He helped her place the groceries inside and drove carefully through the rain. Unlike most drivers, he didn't complain about the traffic. Instead, they talked. Fatou quickly realized he was intelligent, respectful, and surprisingly well educated. You seem different from most people, she said. Moussa smiled. My father always taught me that your job should never decide your character. When they arrived, Fatou reached for her wallet. Moussa shook his head. No need. She looked confused. You've already paid. I haven't given you anything. You gave me a pleasant conversation. Fatou couldn't help but smile. No one had treated her with such kindness in a long time. Over the next few weeks, they met again by chance. Sometimes at the market. Sometimes outside her office. Sometimes she intentionally called his taxi because she enjoyed talking with him. Little by little, a genuine friendship began to grow. One evening, they sat together at a small cafe, laughing over coffee. Across the street, Aminata happened to walk by with her friends. She froze. Her eyes widened. Fatou? Fatou stood up with a smile. Aminata. Come join us. But before she could answer, Aminata looked at Moussa and laughed. So, you're actually dating the taxi driver now? The cafe suddenly became quiet. Several people turned to look. Fatou calmly took a sip of her coffee. Then she smiled. Yes. And honestly, he's one of the kindest men I've ever met. Aminata shook her head in disbelief. You can have him. What I want is a millionaire. Moussa remained silent. A faint smile crossed his face. Because he knew something. That Aminata would soon discover. A week later, the city's largest charity gala filled the luxurious Grand Royal Hotel. Business leaders, celebrities, and wealthy entrepreneurs arrived one after another. Aminata had spent hours getting ready. Tonight, she believed, might finally be the night she met the rich man she had always dreamed of marrying. As she entered the grand ballroom with her friends, her eyes sparkled at the sight of designer dresses, expensive watches, and luxury cars parked outside. This, she whispered with a smile, is where I belong. Suddenly, the room grew quiet. Everyone turned toward the entrance. A sleek black luxury car stopped in front of the hotel. The driver stepped out first. Then opened the rear door. A tall man wearing a perfectly tailored black suit slowly emerged. Confident. Elegant. Respected. The crowd immediately began applauding. Mr. Moussa Diop has arrived. Aminata frowned. Moussa? It couldn't be. The same taxi driver she had laughed at stood before her looking like one of the most powerful men in the room. She watched in disbelief as CEOs, politicians, and investors lined up to shake his hand. One businessman proudly announced, "Mr. Diop owns the largest transportation company in the region. Thousands of taxis, buses, and logistics vehicles operate under his company." Another added, "He still drives one taxi every week." Someone asked why. Moussa smiled. "Because it reminds me where I started, and helps me understand how people treat those they believe have nothing." Aminata felt her knees grow weak. Every cruel word she had spoken echoed inside her mind. Moments later, she slowly walked toward him. I'm sorry," she whispered, unable to meet his eyes. "I judged you without knowing who you really were." Moussa looked at her kindly. Then he smiled. "You didn't reject me because I was poor. You rejected the person you thought I was. There is a difference." Tears filled Aminata's eyes. "I made the biggest mistake of my life." Before she could say anything else, Fatou approached. Moussa gently took her hand. "I'd like everyone to meet the woman who believed in me before she knew anything about my success." The guests applauded as Fatou smiled through tears. For the first time, Aminata truly understood what she had lost. Months later, Moussa and Fatou were happily married. Together, they created scholarships for young people and expanded their charity programs to help struggling families across the country. As for Aminata, she changed too. She stopped judging people by their clothes, their jobs, or the cars they drove. Because she had learned a lesson that money could never buy. The richest person in the room isn't always the one wearing the most expensive suit. Sometimes, true wealth is found in kindness, humility, and character. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who believes that a person's true value is found in their heart, not their appearance.